everybody. Raul here for Bass Musician Magazine, and today we have the great honor and pleasure of chatting with El Ilustre, Don Oscar Stagnaro.
¿Qué tal, Raúl? ¿Cómo estamos? Gracias por la invitación. Very honored to be with you in this interview.
Oh, my pleasure, Oscar. Starting from the beginning, you are a powerhouse on the Latin American music front, and we definitely want to talk a little bit about that, but how did you get started in music and on bass?
All right, we have to go back to 1971, 1972.
Wow.
I am from Peru, and before coming to the States, I used to have a band with my brother Ramon. He's a guitar player. He lives in LA, and he has recorded with everybody. I mean, he's a session guy in LA. And when we were living in Peru, at the time of the cassette, so you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
He got a guitar when he was 12, and then he started playing the guitar. And I didn't want to be a musician because at that time, well, still, musicians don't have any good reputation as a professional career, never mind in Peru.
Yeah.
Maybe after 40 years, it has changed like 10% the mentality, because it hasn't changed much. But that's due to the fact that the many musicians at that time, they were not like professional inclined. They were super talented, but they didn't project a good image and, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All right. So with my brother, he got the guitar, and then after a few years, we got another guitar, and he started already playing. And the way that he used to learn stuff from the listening to the radio was that I sat into the stereo. That's what he used to call. So the dial. At that time, he was interested in Santana, of course.
Yes.
So he got Evil Ways and Samba Pati. So the way that he used to transcribe is I sit, so we look for the tune that was playing on the radio, Samba Pati, and then he pick up like the first three bars.
Yeah.
And then the tune change, the tune is stopped, so we have to look for another version of Samba Pati in another radio station.
Yeah.
So suddenly, after like 2 days, he got the whole thing, with the solo. So that was like e-training in a different way of, as a concept, in a different way of picking up stuff. Mm-hmm. But then we used to play in a band that we formed that was only acoustic, but we played surf music. So the guys that we used to listen was the Ventures.
Yeah.
So we play all the movie like 007 and then Apache and then Walk Don't Run, but with acoustic guitars because we didn't have any resources to buy electric guitars.
Yeah.
So the problem is that there was already another guitar player that was playing the company guitar, which we call the second guitar that played the chords, and there was no space for the bass. So when we got the second acoustic guitar, I was sent to play the bass on the acoustic guitar. So, and I didn't know what it is, so I was playing, like just for fun for a few years.
Yeah.
Then we got some help from a music store, so we bought the equipment. They gave us a break. Then we started playing like with an orchestra, like a dance orchestra in Peru. And we play half an hour of cover tunes. They play half an hour. And we played many gigs like that for a while. Then we bought new equipment. We got into grand funk, more like contemporary stuff, so on. So then I got into playing more with orchestras because I started meeting people in Peru. And then I started into the studio. I did a lot of studio work in Peru. And then got into the conservatory, and then got into a few bands that were the top in Peru, like Black Sugar was one of them. And then another orchestra we used to be called Orquesta Contemporánea, and there was a musician, a piano player from Peru, Jaime Delgado Aparicio, that studied at Berkeley, and then he went back to Peru and formed this band. It was like sort of like a Boston Pops band. And then we played only one concert a year in the benefit of a hospital that helped children. So, we did for many years, and then we did a live recording. So it was very lucky to be living in Peru at that time because we did, like I'm saying, a huge training, learning on the spot. But also we got into these recording situations that we did a lot of recording for, not only for singers, but jingles as well.
Yeah.
So I played for a jingle house that the owner, who was a musician as well, he came with an idea. Says, "Man, we have 3 jingles today. So this is my idea." And he sang only the rhythm. I said, "What is the harmony?" "Oh, no. These are the lyrics." So we have to come up with the melody, the harmony, and everything. And then after a while that we were playing, he said, "Man, that's it. You know. Yeah. So that happened like every day. So that way we had this another training of creativity. I don't know, whatever it's called. It's like a professional lab that you get paid to create music in this case, with no charts. And then we started remembering and then putting the stuff together and arranging and all this stuff. So it was very good. That was 1975. I moved to the States in 1979. So that was my start. And my first bass that I had was, of course, a borrowed bass, a Fender Mustang was one of them, and then another Peruvian bass. But then I got a Clira. It's like the violin. It's like a replica of a Hofner, but low budget, but made in Germany as well. Yeah, so it's similar to the Hofner, and then we play many gigs with that one. Then I move on to the Fender that I got when I played with this band Black Sugar, and the manager bought the bass from another bass player, and then he sold it to me. Like I pay him with the gigs, I play like $30 a gig, and I pay for that bass $300. It was like a 69 position.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah. So, and that bass was the one that I recorded a lot in Peru. Yeah, great instrument. I still have it. Yeah.
So when you came to the United States, because again, it sounds like you had a lot going on with the music scene of Peru.
Yeah.
Why or how did you decide to come to the U.S.?
Okay. So back in like 75, there was an arranger that studied also at Berkeley, Pancho Sáenz. He moved to Mexico afterwards, and he got into this band called Black Sugar. This band, Black Sugar, was like type of like Chicago, Blood, Sweat, and Tears, with 5 horns and 3 singers. But we also play salsa. We also play Peruvian music. So it was like a dance band that could go to a concert and then play our own stuff. Like sort of like, I remember the influence was like Ray Barretto, like Barry White, and Earth, Wind and Fire. So all that mix was that band.
Yeah.
Okay. So then the arranger got a TV show that we have to accompany singers, and this band was the house band. But at that time, my reading was awful. Okay. So we rehearsed like 2 hours before the show, then play live. And then he started bringing all these 16-note figures above F. And I said, "Man, I can't read that stuff. What do you mean?" So he has to sit with me and sing the melody. And then I memorize the stuff before the show. Because I could read chord symbols, no problem. But then notes, I couldn't read. But then after a while, he said, "Man, you have to leave. You can't stay in Peru. Don't waste your talent, whatever." But then the person that made the decision for me was my wife, because at that time we were like boyfriends, and then she moved to the States, and she told me, "If I don't leave, you're never gonna leave." And then she left, to the States. And then a year later, because I thought I was gonna get the visas easy, but we had like a military government that there was no visas allowed, so I had to wait a year to come to the States. So she came in 78, I came in 79.
How did you get working in the music scene in the U.S.? Because again, you had a solid foundation from Peru, but...
Yeah. So when I moved to Boston, because she lived in Boston, I always had the dream to go to Berkeley, whatever, but I didn't go to Berkeley. So I didn't bring my bass because I was afraid, people was going to think that I was going to stay and so on. So I came as a tourist. But then we got married, and my wife had the citizenship. So then everything was all set. But when I came, I didn't know anybody here. And then I thought that I spoke English because I studied in Peru in an English school.
Yeah.
But when I came here, nobody understood what I was saying. I said, "What?" And me, the same way, I didn't understand what they were saying because the Boston accent is very hard, different, So I was trying to speak the proper English. I said, "Forget it. That's not going to work." So the way that I learned was going to the music store and then just chatting with the guys. Because I used to read the downbeat, and then get the words that I couldn't understand and put it on the paper, and then translate the word and then put it back, and then, now I know what they're saying. Mm-hmm. So it was like transcribing lyrics, but like music related text.
Exactly.
Yeah. But then I started meeting people here. I went to Berkeley just to visit, and then I started meeting people, and then starting to see that I had a lot of stuff that I didn't value as much as I value now, in the sense of experience, that I play lots of styles, that I read music, that I could just sit in and then make it work, because the experience of recording as well, that the sound was already there. So yeah, I have a lot of pluses that when I left Peru, I didn't know that I had it, because they were already always there, so you don't realize that. So I moved to another area, and then I auditioned for a band. It was called Fortuna Bay back in 1979, that had a gig in the Caribbean islands, 1 month in St. Croix, 1 month in St. Thomas. So I brought a cassette with a recording that I did in Peru for the sound, that I thought, okay, listen to that, and if it's worth enough, I do the audition. So they called me for the audition, and then they said, man, you're in the band. So so that was my entrance. We play a lot of cover stuff, which I was familiar with anyway.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's very interesting because you play the wide variety of Latin music, and there's a lot of it that's very different. I know that people may not be as exposed because there's, like typical music from Peru, but what you play in the Caribbean, the salsa and all that stuff is different. I was pleasantly surprised, like in Mexico, on the areas that are in the coast, they tend to be more like the salsa kind of as well. But then you had Venezuela with salsa, but then Brazilian music is a totally different thing as well. And you have been so well versed. You're the go-to guy for like all of these kinds of musics.
Well, I've been very lucky. One of the professional assets that you have to have in Peru in that time to work was your versatility. Mm-hmm. So you have to know how to play Brazilian music or Venezuelan, because sometimes we had a lot of conferences that were held in Peru. So the people that came, they wanted to hear that. But the problem is, like, you play anything and anything sounds good, because there is no a filter that could tell you, oh, you're playing the wrong field. You know what I'm saying? They play the melody, it's fine, they play the percussion, but then the bass, nobody's going to tell you that you're playing the wrong bass line. Mm-hmm. But when I moved to the States, I was friends with Sal Cuevas. I don't know if you know who he's a great bass player. Mm-hmm. So he gave me a cassette that repeating that with Brazilian music, with a lot of stuff. And then when I get to play with Brazilian guys, they said, man, that's not the Brazilian feel at all. okay, let me know. Give me the CDs or whatever to hear it. And then I start working on those. That's the feel. But that was in Boston. My diversity came to play with people from different countries here. And then also for the opportunity that Paquito's touring schedule, that we have traveled to a lot of countries. So I've been able to meet people in the countries that going to rehearsals or going to anniversaries of their performances, where I was able to check it out, how they play. And I always ask questions. The person that I'm never happy with one answer. So I just want to hear a lot of stuff, and then I make my own conclusion. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So that way you expand your view of whatever style, plus then you set up like a formula of like research that that's point 1, that's point 10, that you have to follow that. It's not going to work. So you have to go back to the roots of like rhythms, percussion instrument, orchestration, repertoire, composers, then bass players. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? So it's not bass players and then the rest. It's the opposite.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Well, and in part of that analysis, because you've been the student of so many of these music forms and feels and all that, but you're also an educator. So even though you didn't go to Berkeley, you've been teaching at Berkeley since 1988.
Yes. So that happened in Boston, and there used to be, not anymore, bands that play weddings and so on. They call it GB, General Business Bands. Okay. So it happens that I was in one, that with great musicians, sometimes George Garçon sub in and then Bob Moses and so on. So, and then we played like 3 years on a row, like the Berkeley Christmas party. But at that time, I already played with many professors from Berkeley in different bands. So I get my name around and I play a lot.
Yeah.
So, but it happened that, and then in the parties, the chairman of that time, Rich Appelman, he was starting to become friends and so on. And then so I met Bruce Gertz, another teacher, whom I took a lesson when I first came to back in '79. Mm-hmm. So I knew these guys. I wasn't friends with them, but I knew they knew who I was because I was playing a lot. And then it happens that one of the parties in '79 that I was playing, the drummer was a sub from the regular drummer, and then he was a Berkeley teacher, Dave Wagner, and he told me, you know what, you should apply to Berkeley to teach because this person just passed away, and I just heard that they're looking for electric players. Mm-hmm. Yeah, electric teachers. Yeah. Oh man, I don't want to teach. I don't want to play. I mean that, but I already have experience teaching. Yeah, I was teaching at one conservatory near my house, and then music stores. So I had experience, teaching kids as well. So I have all that stuff. And then I went to apply, and I brought I have a lot of vinyl that when I recorded in Peru, so I brought that, And then I went to the interview, and the first thing that Rick told me is, there's nobody in the department that had so many recordings. And I said, okay, that's one thing. And then another thing is I saved all the programs from the concert that I did in Peru and the pictures with the Boston Pop sort of Peruvian band and so on. So I have everything organized.
Nice.
And we have an interview, and I think the main thing that they wanted to know if I could communicate in English, Mm-hmm. So which is, I'm going to teach at that level, college. So I have to know how to talk and so on. Yeah. So after the interview, he says, man, okay, we'll call you next week. Okay. Next day, they called me up. He said, you want to teach here? So, okay, let me think about it. Yes. Okay. Yes. So I went. Yeah, but it happened that another teacher, Danny Morris, which is a great educator as well, we both got into at the same time. What happened with Danny is he was the first bass player. When I moved to Boston, I went to see a band, and he was a bass player. So I talked to him and so on. And his girlfriend at that time was a keyboard player from the band that I went to the Caribbean islands. It's like very weird, you know. Alison Lassans. So when I came to rehearse with that band, I used to stay at Danny's house. Back in '78, 79. Yeah. And then 10 years or 8 years later, we both got into Berkeley.
Very nice.
Yeah, well, a very weird thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and it's kind of one of those things that many times people don't realize how something that they're doing now might influence or affect something down the road. And the fact that you were organized enough to keep records, to be able to show like those programs and stuff, I think a lot of people don't consider doing that. And so then they just go, well, yeah, I've been playing since this year, but I can't tell you anything specific about it. Yeah. And then also getting a reputation where you're a good person to work with. I think that also having a good work ethic, and I think that's been one of the problems when society looks at musicians. And I think that especially in Latin America, a lot of times they look at them as like bohemians that are just they're living in the moment, and it's all drinks and party and no responsibility and
yeah, you having too much fun, you shouldn't get paid.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, it's I think the word professional means a lot. Mm-hmm. So if you consider yourself a professional, you have to respect what it means. So you have to understand a professional doctor. If he's operating his worst enemy, he's not going to let his worst enemy die, for example, because he's a professional. Yeah. So things like that make you think and make you like draw the line from here. You can't get out. This is what a professional means. So you have to be on time. You have to, don't speak if you don't ask to say anything. Yeah. So you make the leader's role easier and simple.
Gotcha.
And then you get the call back.
Yeah. Absolutely. And in addition to teaching in person, you've got some books you've written. The one that always comes to mind is the Latin Bass book.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, the Latin bass book came up with Chuck Scher's idea, of course. I used to play with a vibes player from Mexico, Victor Mendoza. He was a Berkeley teacher, then he moved to Valencia. And then one of his tunes got into the Latin real book that I arranged with him and with another person. So then he said, oh, Chuck is planning to do a Latin bass book. So he got in touch with Andy Gonzalez. He got in touch with Bobby Rodriguez. But they didn't want to do it because it's a lot of work, you know. I even called, when I met Bobby Rodriguez, he said, why you don't want to do the book? He said, oh, man, just listen to my stuff and that's it. You know?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, right, which is good. But that's not the whole thing.
Yeah.
Know? But then I got compromised with him. But at that time, I was starting to play with the Caribbean Jazz Project, like 1995. This book came out in 2000. So when I got the approach to do it, I said, hey, I'll do it because I was working already. I developed courses in the bass department for like Latin courses to explain how to play the Latin, field. So I developed one in like Latin styles, or mainly it's Cuban styles. Then another one is side reading dance tunes. So I have it from like different eras. So one is like 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, which is orchestras like Sonora Matancera, Los Bambam, or Isaac Delgado. So I have all those charts now. And then another one that plays melodies of Latin jazz, and then create your own melody to accompany that. So you have three areas of the Latin bass. So I was working on that already. So when he approached me, he says, yeah, we'll do it. So what is the concept for the book? I want this book to last for like 50 years. I said, okay. So it means I have to be like an encyclopedia.
Yeah.
Yes, perfect. So I started working with him and I said, okay, I'll do the book, but also we have to include Brazilian music and then Latin American music or South American music. Okay, so he says, yeah, but it's too much because it's going to be like 3 CDs. See, how much is each CD? It's like $1. So what's the problem,
Yeah.
So I convinced him to have this book that has 3 CDs and then these 3 different areas, which are the most important music expressions from Latin America, Cuba, Brazil, and then Latin America, which that's the way it goes. So in the Latin American section, of course, I included Peru. I have Argentina, then Venezuela, of course, and then some Colombian stuff, So it's not a lot, but this is 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So at that time it was helpful, But then it took me a while to just write, because I was on tour a lot, so I had to write and send it. So by 1999, he said, okay, you have to come to my house 3 days, and we'll get the book done. Yeah. And that's what we did. So I went to his house, and then we went example by example to define what clave was. But he got it, all the structure. Chuck is great, he got all the structure of the book. But then after that, I went to San Francisco in another day to record the tracks for the Latin section, which are 45. And then I went, and then in 3 days, we record like 15 tracks each day.
Wow.
Yeah, so that was Rebeca Mauleón. I was very lucky. Orestes Vilató, and then Edgardo Cambón was the percussionist.
Yeah.
So then we'll develop this, and then I had some ideas with the structures. So it's some easier harmony parts and some complicated, and then some tunes. So it's a combination. So it is not only Latin harmony oriented, it's mixed. And then the Brazilian part we recorded in New York with the Paquito's Rhythm section, Mark Walker and Dario Eskenazi, after a gig that we have at the Blue Note. So when we played at the Blue Note, I think it was the record that won the Grammy afterwards. So that was the only time that we were together, to record. And after the gig, 1 a.m., we record from 1 to 5 a.m. We went to New Jersey to John Lee, who's a bass player for Dizzy Gillespie Band, to record at his studio. And we were recording in his living room because there was no studio. And then, that was it. The Latin American part are recorded here in Boston with people from the countries. That's what I meant before, I'm talking about 2000 or 1999, that I got people that I was playing with from Venezuela, from Argentina, that we record the stuff with them.
Wow.
So that was very interesting stuff. Yeah.
Well, and a name that keeps coming up because you have played quite a bit with Paquito de Rivera.
Yeah.
How did that come about?
Okay, so I'm friends with Lincoln Goinsky, who's a great help. So I used to play with different bands in Boston that open up for, in that time, Latin jazz was very big. So Tania Maria, and then Michel Camilo, then Ayrton also, and then Paquito, Claudio Roditi, they came to Boston. And the bands that I play happens that we open for them. Okay. So then I got to meet Lincoln. I got to meet Sergio Brandao, a few guys, from New York. And then Lincoln came to my house. So we met, we played. And then went to New York, we planned to play. And then Victor Mendoza, again, he recorded one of his albums. And then Paquito and Claudio Roditi were the guests. So that's probably my first experience with them. And then Lincoln called me like 2 years later to sub for him at a jazz club here in Boston, Scholars, because he was doing a movie date in New York. So he said, man, can you sub for me one set? Okay, so no problem. And in the band at that time was Danilo Perez, was Claudio Roditi, and then Akira Tan, I think, was playing drums. Okay, so I went to the rehearsal in the afternoon. I transcribed like 20 tunes. I put it in my book, so I can really prepare with my book and, Paquito's with his picture. I'm like a little weird. I like to be very organized and,
Yeah.
Then we start playing like 2-3 tunes. And then at the third tune, Paquito says, man, rehearsal is over. I say, Paquito, but there's a lot of tunes. Don't worry, man. So he went to his room and came back with a red jacket that in the back says Havana, New York Ensemble. That was his name, the name of the group before. And he gives me the jacket and says, welcome to the Mafia.
Yeah.
And that was it.
Wow.
1991, 92. Yeah. And then from then on, we played a lot. Yeah.
Yes.
And record a lot and so on. Yeah.
Very nice. Now, I'd be remiss because I know that all bass players obsess about gear. And so I always like to ask, how are you getting your sound? What are you playing on?
I played, when I came to Boston, I played through a Polyton before, a Polyton. And in the gigs that I had, I bought a Radio Shack tweeter at that time that you put it so you get your slap sound. But it was like directional. It was not like that, So only people that was in front of you could hear it.
Yeah.
But anyway, I bought then a Gallien-Kruger. It was 400 RB, then the 800 RB. And then I got a speaker that is made in Boston. I got 15-inch, great sound. So but it was super heavy. So I used to carry both things all over the place. Then I used that for a while. And then I bought an Ampeg as well, not the old ones, but the new is with transistors, I guess, Yeah. So it's the old style, that you put the head inside.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but the new version, which is a great sound as well. And then I got involved with Aguilar, so that's what I use now, Aguilar. Yeah. Great gear, by the way. Yeah. I'm serious. It's like a Polyton, but like a few steps up. Well, the same concept of warm sound. Yeah.
And lighter than the other ones that you would mentioned as well, I'm sure. So moving along your sound chain, then you're playing on Warwick basses predominantly?
Yes. I played my 4-string for a while, but then my brother, Ramon, he sent me a bass, a 5-string Warwick, a streamer, neck through.
Mm-hmm.
So by, some kind of weird thought at that time, we had a tour with Paquito in 1992, going through like 5 weeks in Europe. And then I bought both basses, the Fender and the Warwick. So I put it in one case and then carry stuff.
Yeah.
And I didn't know. This is 25 years ago, so I could carry it with no problem, But then the first gig was in Athens. So we did the sound check with the Fender. There was no problem, we got the sound. Then when Paquito went to his dressing room, I pull out the Warwick and I start trying it. So I played melodies. And then Paquito came out of the dressing room and says, man, you have to use that bass tonight, the 5-string. I said, no. So I ended up using it.
Yeah.
So, I was playing D thinking there was a G, in the lowest string. So it was awful. But and on top of that they record that night, for like TV. So I was like, what's point?
Yeah.
All the time. So, things like that. But after that, I used that bass to record with the Caribbean Jazz Project, and then some stuff with Paquito. That was 1995. 92, when I got the 5-string, then we started working a lot with the 5-string.
Got you. Well, and now you're up to a 6-string.
Yeah. In order to get the Warwick endorsement, I got in touch with the Dana B. Goods. They used to be the distributors in LA. And the person was Mike Brown, was the artist relation. I used to teach with Berkeley in Italy, the jazz camps. So I met, because I was friends with Arturo Maya, he's a Brazilian bass player, and then he was also a working endorser. But the endorsement that he had was from Brazil, not from the US. So I couldn't, so I have to get endorsement from the US. I said, man, how come you don't have an endorsement with with Warwick? I said, no, I don't know. So I've been trying. So, but they send me strings, they send me some stuff, but never a bass.
Yeah.
So after a few years, I'm talking about, 1995, and then the sixth string that I got was in 2006, 10 years.
Wow.
So I used to call Mike Brown. I said, man, well, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. And after a while, I got upset. I said, man, who is the person that I have to talk to get an endorsement? Because I did never ask that. And he said, it's me. Okay. So then I had like 2 Grammys at that time, and I had other stuff. So I put a portfolio together and I sent it to him. Next day he called me up. I mean, when he received the stuff, he says, okay, what bass you want? I said, okay, 6 string.
Yeah.
So then I got it, and this is it. This is the 6 string.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
Which I opened the case, and the bass sounded great. I have, unbelievable, very well made. And the situation for me was like, even though this bass is considered more like a rock bass, I think you could manipulate it and then make it sound a little different, especially for Latin jazz in my case. So it has a different tone, not usually the usual tone for Latin music. So you could, speak up in get a different voice. So that's what I started. I hang on with him, with these guys.
Very cool.
Yeah.
And something that's leapt out to me is the bright color of your strings. You're playing on DR strings, aren't you?
I used to play those DR strings, yeah. No, I play DRs, but this one is like the regular ones.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, but I played those for like 2-3 years. They have a different sound, yeah. Very nice. But I went back to this just for the slap, so this one. And these strings, they last for longer as well.
Okay.
The stainless steels there, and they're a little more flexible as well, so they have a little room to don't get tendonitis or anything like that trying to get the sound.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Another area that many times gets overlooked is instrument cable. Do you have a preference in instrument cable coming from your bass to your amp?
Yes, I have this one. I think it's a Mogami. Let me just show it to you. Can you see it?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a Mogami. I bought it because I think this is a great cable. It's great for recording. That's what I'm doing, because it's a very fat cord as well, so it's not. And now, of course, I have all these ones, which is, just for practicing. But this one is very clean sound. Yeah.
Nice. And are there any other key elements or things that you use to get your sound?
No, it's my fingers.
Yes.
My fingers and my ear. Whenever I go to, because I don't carry my amp that much out, so whenever I use another amps, I just put everything flat, and then in the bass, the way I play it, and then try to get the sound in the amp, and then control it from the bass. So I add bass or take bass out. Simple. Yeah. But the sound is like, if you don't hear it, because each room has a different sound. Yeah. So you have to adapt to the room first, see how much bass is it, and so on. And then when the people comes in, it's going to change again. So you have to have that room, It's not like a pop concert that, it's going to be 10,000 people and there's somebody else doing the sound. We don't have that advantage. So we have to do it ourselves. And you always have to sound good. And you have to know how to project your sound as well. Even when you play pianissimo, where you play forte, so don't overpower the leader of the band.
Yeah.
So that's super important. If not, you get fired.
Absolutely. Well, and in a lot of the Latin jazz, especially when you've got a horn section and you've got a full percussion section, there's a lot of sound. Yeah. And so it's kind of, you can't let them overwhelm you, but you can't be over them too much either. So finding that balance is critical.
Yeah, sometimes I have to play with no bass in the bass. Because when the bass goes to all the mics, then it starts growing, and then the bass is like huge.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but I tend to play with no treble, so at least it's not, that's annoying you.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and they try to play in the register on the bass that it doesn't affect the musicians as well. I mean, the melody or the bass or the congas. Because if you play lower than the G, if the congas are tuned in G, you're going to clash a lot. So you have to avoid things like that. Yeah.
Yeah. There, and the thing is, you've got between the congas and if there's timbales or bongo, now you've got all of the different tunings that you have to be concerned about. So it's very specific.
You have to find your own area, you know, a little bit of space. Why? Okay, that's my space.
There you go. There you go. Well, and we're talking in times of the pandemic, and I know a lot of plans have changed when we talk about the future. And nobody knows what's going to happen as far as live venues and tours, and so much. A lot of people are adapting in computer ways. The way we're on Skype, you know, they're adapting with Zoom, and they're still doing recordings, but sending each other files and kind of putting things together, but not all in one place. What are your plans for the future? What would you like to be doing?
Well, I was talking to my son. My son plays percussion with Ricky Martin.
Okay.
But for example, they have something in program from next year, but I don't think it's going to happen. Okay, and we're talking about August. So I think, and I'm realistic, but optimistic at the same time. It's not like I'm pessimistic that this thing is going to stay forever. Of course not. But we have to be gaining new ways or creating new ways of what's going to happen. So you have to imagine that, because nobody knows what's going to happen. What we know is what we know right now. Sure. You have to be proficient in doing videos and proficient in doing recordings, proficient in doing lessons, proficient in creating new material. So this is a great opportunity for creativity, of course. And then you have to understand that no matter what kind of gear you have, if you don't have the right skills, the stuff doesn't work. So if you need to work in your skills, you gotta get it done. So this is the best opportunity, meaning harmony or diversity, styles, sound, whatever. So in my case, I've been lucky enough to be asked to do a lot of video recording. But when I started, man, it was awful. I couldn't, record anything. Oh, the camera is in the wrong thing. Oh, the sound is not. But it happened that I already bought some gear a few years ago that I never used. I had like an Avalon DI, which is great, and I had it in the box like for 8 years.
Oh, wow.
Because I didn't have the need to record at home. And then I put it back, and then I bought a Apogee, the little interface. So then I started working on Logic, which I never did before, because I hate to do videos of myself playing, to tell you the truth. I don't like that.
Yeah.
But if it's with a band, great. But then I started getting the chops to do stuff quicker, because I hate to waste time doing that stuff. But there is no other way. You got to spend the time that is needed. Then I created some bass courses on Fridays. So in June I started. So I created one, I call it like a jazz series. I did 10 master classes for people that got into my Zoom. I learned how to use Zoom into my Zoom room. And we went from blues to minor blues to rhythm changes. So the classes were every 2 weeks. So they have a chance to register and then to study. And it was not for the whole course, but they could go in and out from whatever class they needed. They got in, they paid whatever fee, and then they got in. And then I send them a video of the class, and then I send them PDFs that I got with information like theory, like guide tones, like approach notes, and the walking bass lines, and so on. So it's like a practical guide to each of the subjects of the lesson at that time. So we did like 10, like I'm saying, and the last few were like the music of One Shoulder, then the music of Chick Corea, the last two.
Oh, nice. What
happens that I already play that stuff, so I know how to explain, with terms and with material that will help the people. And then I created playlists in YouTube for each class. So each class has a playlist of like 100 tunes, for example.
Wow.
Yeah. And then I have a specific 2-3 tunes for that class that they have to learn. Or if they, go on. So then I think, I think I'm going to create more courses. So I create one, of course, the Latin course, which music from Cuba. There was like styles from Cuba from the 1860s, like the habanera, dance, and so on. So I have to study a lot because I have material, but I never put it together in a file or in a PDF. So, and then I studied like the history of what bands were playing, what the composer, the orchestration, and so on. So I ended up with a lot of material. So that was the second course. Then I created a slab Latin because I have another book, the Latin bass slabs, like a Latin American bass slab.
Yeah.
So I have that one, the same idea with playlists, with PDFs. But then I start to develop independence. So I played one thing with the left hand and then the cascara or stuff on the right hand. So they could, it's not like only slapping.
Sure.
So you're doing a little more than that and creating your own bass lines. Then I create another one which is called Latin American Bass, using my book as well, that feature the music of Argentina, Peru, Colombia, and Venezuela, 2 hours of each class, in every 2 weeks.
Wow.
So the other courses that I designed after the first one are only 4 weeks, because 10 is a lot for a person to hold on. But so then I create another one for music reading, because there's a lot of people that doesn't know how to read music, so I create that as well. It's called Lectura Musical, and I create my own exercises using Sibelius and so on. So it's 4 lessons of that as well. And then now I have one in February coming up, which is going to be called the Brazilian Bass. Nice. So I'm going to use, because I never used my book for that purpose. I had my book, I used it at Berkeley, but this is a different area that I never exposed, the book. So then I thought about, what's something that a bass player could benefit. Okay, so I create a course that is going to be a guitar and bass, 2 teachers, a guitar player from Argentina and myself, doing these master classes that start in January, once a week. So we're going to do the first class is blues, the second class is minor blues, the third class is rhythm changes, and the fourth class is contemporary blues. So a student could see what the guitar player is playing, what voicings, what is the advice for a guitar player, and the guitar student could check out what is the bass player playing. Mm-hmm. So it's important. So we are going to condense it in 2-hour class, each of the series, and so we're going to have PDFs and so on. So there's a lot of subjects that sometimes are ignored, like how to comp. In jazz, it's like sparks. It's not like a whole note. You never hear a whole note as a comping. Mm-hmm. And then that's what makes a difference. Also phrasing. So it's a lot of details stuff that we're going to include in this that are not in the books. The books can't tell you that.
Got you. Well, and where's the best place if people want to find this stuff? Is it OscarStagnaroBass.com?
Yeah, but I don't advertise there because that's my own page. But in Facebook, it's called Bass en Vivo, Facebook. Okay. Then you could find all the stuff. Or in my Facebook as well, Oscar Stagnaro Facebook. And then in Instagram, I put it there.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Well, Oscar, it's so great to have a chance to hear your journey, to hear about all of your experience. I hope that young musicians take note of some of the things that have helped you be so successful in your organization and being such a good person to work with, because it just shows, and that versatility and being able to do so many things. Thank you so much, Oscar. You've seen him here. Oscar Stagnaro on Bass Musician Magazine.
Thanks for the opportunity. It's an honor to be here. Mm-hmm. And I wish everybody a lot of success, but you have to have a lot of patience and hope. The things that are coming on are not going to be easier, but there is always a way to find the answer for any problem, So then you have to get better at playing. Yeah. That's what it is. You get better at playing, then you get the calls.
There you go. Well, gracias.
Hasta pronto. Gracias a ti.